You're listening to the Sonny Brown Breakdown. Now, it is time to break it down.
Welcome to episode number 55 of the Sonny Brown Breakdown. I'm your host Sonny Brown, and in this episode I talk to Luke Martin. He's a Jiu-Jitsu Black Belt who runs Sydney West Martial Arts Academy and recently switched from coaching a mix of gi and no-gi to only no-gi for his adults classes. And we discuss why he made that decision, how he feels the culture of no-gi Jiu-Jitsu is progressing, and John Danaher's influence on the sport. We also get an update on his online learning connection with Jason Rao and discuss the utility of wrestling shoes, which I think acts as a good way to explore how he views internal versus external influences on culture. If you'd like to support the show, please drop a 5-star rating on iTunes or purchase a shirt from scuffle.com.au. Also, I've been uploading more breakdowns to YouTube the last few weeks, so if you want to check those out, you can find the link on sunnybrown.net. And without further ado, let's go to the podcast. Mr. Luke Martin, how are you doing today, mate?
I'm well, Sonny Brown. How are you, my friend?
Not too bad at all. Just recovering after a big weekend. And I know you're just recovering after a morning training session as you guys prep for ADCC trials. How's that going?
Yeah, good. Yeah, really good. So I actually didn't go live this morning. I tried to, I'd love to go live every session, but because I'm also in a coaching, well, mainly in a coaching role, I have to, consider the team and consider what's best for them, not just best for me. So a lot of the morning sessions, I'll actually sit out and watch just so I can see what's going on, make adjustments, see if there's a direction that everyone's heading that I'm either happy with or not happy with. When I'm rolling, I can get that feel with them, which is also beneficial. I think a balance is important. But yeah, I try and sit out and watch some of the sessions. So I sat out and watched the guys, just on the mat this morning, there's potentially 5 trials winners just sitting in front of me. So I've got to take it serious. As maybe some of the people know who's listening, ADCC for us is our Olympics. I think it's the best way to describe it. Anyone that's not sure, that's just what I explain. I said, it's really the medal that probably means the most to most people. Some people also put as much or more importance on, say, the gi world championships. But the way I see it, they happen every year. They also allow anybody to compete to some degree, I suppose. Whereas to get to the world championships for ADCC, you actually have to win your trials. Yes, there is invites, but you have to do something to get an invite. You don't just get given that. So, it's such an opportunity for us to demonstrate the quality of the team. So, really, I look at this as from the time I've opened the doors here nearly 9 years ago, this is kind of culminating towards a long time goal, which is to have trials winners. And then obviously once we achieve that, then have the trials winners move forward to the world championships and become medalists and take it out, world champions. Yeah. So I feel like there's a lot of weight on my shoulders to make sure that I'm preparing these guys as perfectly as possible. I mean, there's so many moving parts, but if I see one of them going down a direction that's not assisting in advancing him as a grappler and getting him ready to win, I've got to try and adjust it and move forward. And yeah, there's a lot of moving parts there, but it's quite an enjoyable little puzzle to put together as a coach. So yeah, I didn't actually go live this morning, but I will be going live tonight. We train twice a day most days. So being a coach, I think you have to also be going live. I think if you're just sitting on the sidelines, I've pretty much only seen John Danaher as the guy who can manage to do that and still be a top coach. I think as a general rule, guys that don't want to get involved with their students tend to start to lag behind, and it gets to a point where you end up so far behind you can't see the front of the field anymore. Yeah,
I think that's a good way to put it, especially if they're not training anywhere else, if they're not cross-training. You've got to be, where else are you going to get that role in? And I mean, it's obviously probably easier for Danaher to be able to do that in a room with so many top athletes and great minds who can work things out for him. And I think Hodger Gracie was able to do that with, when he moved to England with his students, but probably the exception, not the rule.
Yeah, if you're building yourself as a coach and you're going to look to John Danaher as, I'm not going to train because John doesn't train, I think you're setting yourself up for failure. But that's just what I think,
Yeah.
Hey, everyone can forge their own pathway, Sonny Brown, but I think the key is to stay active as long as possible. And the other thing is, we all start this because we absolutely love grappling. So like I look forward to going live and training each day. I look forward to the physical aspect. I look forward to, the problem solving aspect. I look forward to the camaraderie you get. There's a whole bunch of stuff with it. I think if I wasn't doing that and I was just watching from the sidelines, I would feel like I was missing something also. So, it's not just something you should do so that your students see you down in the trenches with them. I don't think that's it. I think it's something you need to do to keep yourself relevant with the actual basis of what we're doing, which is grappling people. I have to wonder how many of those McDojo life videos you see are guys who didn't like the actual doing side of it. So they start to force themselves so far not force themselves, they gravitate to the other side so much. And before you know it, you're like, are my techniques even real things or am I just making stuff up? Like at the end of the day, if you're going live, you should be able to see your techniques work, I suppose, more often than not.
And that's certainly the thing that keeps the arts honest, so to say. It's, that's the filter that really puts things to the test. And I think one of the things that you've focused on recently with your academy to take it back to that ADCC preparation and focus there is switching your classes to no gi. Mm-hmm. Or, you've taken the jacket off and you've gone into a completely no gi environment. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the only sessions here at Sydney West now that are gi are the kids classes.
Okay.
And not even because I think that it's a valuable training tool for the children as far as their grappling is concerned. I think it's just a valuable tool because it's a uniform that tends to be more identifiable to your average parent who knows absolutely nothing about what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is. You got to remember, I have most parents bring them in. Most parents, I could even ask half the parents that bring their kids here, and most of them will say he does karate. So you got to remember, I'm not saying from a marketing perspective, I'm just saying with kids, you're it's weird. Your market actually don't even know what product you're selling them. It's under this banner of martial arts, but as we know, there's a lot of different sort of offshoots on that. So at this stage, I've left the gi on the children. It makes the belts a little more easy to, because with the kids, I think the belts are more important. Little kids like to see their progression. I mean, everyone likes to see progression, but little kids, the belt system with kids is they progress on a belt every year. Most people work on that with the kids belt system. There's a stripe about every 3 months at gradings and things like that. So they get more milestones more regularly, which can keep them. It's not a matter of just giving them things they haven't earned. They still have to earn it, but it's there's more progressions more often, which works with little kids. I think adults don't need that. And if you do need that as an adult, you need to adjust your mindset a little bit. You shouldn't have to be like a little kid where you have to be given something all the time. So, the kids can see their belt. They can put their stripes on their belt. I kind of get it. So at this stage, I've left it with the kids. But as far as the adults, I look at the adults program as being very, very different to the kids program. The kids program is mainly about them building some confidence, building a little bit of actual spatial awareness and coordination, and being able to learn to move their bodies. Especially nowadays, kids are just not using their bodies for what they're supposed to, and they're becoming overweight at such a young age, and they're just not physically capable of doing nearly anything. So I look at their classes, not even that they can leave here doing an arm bar, but can they leave here like hopping on one leg or something like that? So the program with the kids I look at very differently to the adults. With the adults, I don't care if you can hop on one leg. I care if you could execute, a good keeping escape from mount, for instance. So I want to now gear you up to be as good at grappling as I possibly can in the period of time that you're going to allow for how often you turn up. So, over the years, I've always favored no gi. So it was kind of a direction eventually I was going to go to. And I just got to a point where I realized the bias that I had was confirmed, which was, if given the opportunity to just train without the gi, could we be better than people who were in the gi who just took it off to do no gi? And for a very long time, there was a bit of confusion there. And people were still telling us, no, if you want to be good at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or I like to use the word grappling because, now it's such a hybrid that I don't even know what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is anymore. I feel like for a long time we were just told you have to wear the kimono. We've all been through that. You've got to wear it. That's how you get better at Jiu-Jitsu. And it just didn't make sense to me. I was like, I'm sure that's better if you're going to compete in the kimono. But I don't understand a martial art, which at the end of the day, it's what it is, right? It's a martial art.
Mm-hmm.
If I require my opponent or myself to wear a particular uniform for my moves to be most effective, I feel like that's not a positive, that's a negative. That's not something that's valuable to the martial art. Like it's. I use the analogy with the wrestling, with the shoes. Don't even get me started on wrestling shoes. I know you like wrestling, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that, Sonny.
Yeah, I could give you some.
But guys that come into my training room and want to wear wrestling shoes, I say don't bother. Like if you're going to come onto my mats, you're actually not wearing shoes. There's a whole bunch of things. Anyway, that's a bit off topic, but it's the same sort of vein, right? Where I didn't see a purpose for the gi anymore. Like I said, with the kids, I explained the purpose is not actually for the martial art. It's kind of separate to that. So anyway, I decided, you know what? If we're going to be good at something, let's be very good at it. And having the guys, I kind of dropped the gi classes back and back and back. And I was like, well, if we're not totally committing to it, what are we doing here? We're kind of hedging our bets either way. If we want to be really good at no gi, let's go all in, let's jump in. And we'd left our fundamentals classes as gi sessions until this year. And, you know, I sat down with the instructors and I just said, what do you think? Do we make the plunge with the fundamentals too? And they said, I think there's an appetite for it. And I don't think we're going to miss out on, like, to learn fundamentals doesn't mean I have to have a jacket on. There's no reason why fundamental movements for no-gi grappling should include a jacket. It just doesn't make sense. Fundamental movements are movements that often come up in common situations. So there may be slightly different fundamentals for no-gi than there is gi. For instance, does a person who's doing a lot of no-gi need to know a cross-collar choke from guard? Well, actually, it's got no purpose whatsoever for him. So why teach that in the fundamentals class, for instance? So we end up dropping it. Our fundamentals classes have gone through the roof as far as numbers. So what we get now is probably 20 to 25 in a fundamental session each day. It drew in more color belts that were like, okay, well, here's a session that is now of utility to me. And they jump in, get some extra training. It's done nothing but be a positive direction. I mean, maybe it alienates some people that look around for a gym and go, oh, these guys don't do any gi. I like the gi. I'm not going there. I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But there would also be plenty the other direction. Oh, I really like no gi. These guys do no gi. So I'm not too worried about that. I find as we get further into the new age of jiu-jitsu, there's less people that are just gi purists, unless it's been forced upon them via their academy. I think if given the opportunity, a lot of people really enjoy the flowing nature of no gi. So yeah, I'm very happy with the decision. And everybody thinks their own gym is the best, but I can kind of say, based on our competition success and just based on when we have visitors come in of all levels, they're generally quite shocked at the actual quality in the training room. I can say that it's helping us become, you know, the top academy in Australia, and that's been my goal from the get-go. So yeah, it's exciting times.
Yeah, it's certainly been interesting to follow along and see this development, because I've known what a competent and skilled coach you are, and I've been, you know, seeing your students perform well on the competition mats and in the training room. And it kind of has just been that slow process, as you said, 9 years, but it really feels like you guys are certainly on the rise and taking it to that next level out here.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I appreciate the kind words about the coaching. I obsess about this every day. I'm not doing some Instagram fucking inspirational quote here. Other than my family, which is obviously my number one priority, my second priority is to understand grappling as best as possible so that I can teach other people to become as good as they can, depending on how much time they're willing to give me. You know, I've got people in here who are committing a lot of their time and attention to this, and the rate of progression is just phenomenal. So, you know, I've got a mindset where I'm half autistic, so I apply myself to something that I've decided to 100%. And obviously, when it's something positive like this, that's only a benefit. So, you know, in the beginning, I couldn't give as much time as I wanted because I had to have a full-time job to make the academy survive. And then as I got to the point where I was like, you know, I can quit my job and try to make just the academy my sole thing, it just freed up more time to focus on this. So, you know, and this is something that's a bit of a bugbear of mine. Everybody assumes that their coach has their best interest at heart, but a lot of these coaches don't. They just want your membership, right? I need memberships to survive. That's how I make my money. But my priority is that you become really, really good at jiu-jitsu. As long as you're willing to commit to me and come into this training room all the time, you're going to become good. And all these other guys that spout themselves as being coaches, half the time they're off at the beach having a surf, they're doing stuff, and it's like, well, while you're doing that, I'm here studying jiu-jitsu. Now, like, I'm not fucking off during the day. I'm just doing extra time. And it's interesting how people get this sort of view that their coach is trying to make them, they're their number one priority and trying to make them, the highest quality student they can, when they're just not. And that only excites me. That pushes me to push even harder, and it excites me to see how the product that I put out can go against the product put out against other people. That's kind of like the ultimate thing as a coach. It's like, okay, well, like I just said to you before, the way we're going to be able to test each other here, here's some agreed upon rules, ADCC, for instance. Here's people who are very serious about grappling, because if they're doing this, they're probably not just a hobbyist. Let's see who really can produce the highest quality grappler. And that's something that I'm obsessed about right now. And it's also scary. It's a combat sport. Crazy shit happens. I can have my best student go out there and lose in the first round just because something crazy happens. But I do believe that in jiu-jitsu or in grappling, because the better you get, the more you can control the chaos. It should get to a point where the percentages really lay in our favor. Mixed martial arts, you can cross all your T's and dot all your I's, and a guy who has no right losing gets just sparked by some dude who threw a big right hand. I mean, it happens all the time. It's so dynamic. It's so on a knife's edge. I feel with grappling, and Gordon Ryan's a good example of this. He understands every position so well. He just understands it better than his opponents. This sounds crazy, but it's nearly impossible for them to beat him, other than somehow gaming the rules to not let him score on them and then find a way to somehow score or get an advantage. Like, it's nearly impossible for them to actually submit him. And that's my kind of end goal with my guys. If I get them to the point where I just know they're so much more buttoned down in their knowledge base that every single time they're presented with a problem, they have a better answer than their opponent can give them, it should nearly be unfair. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's like, I'm like totally obsessing about this at the moment, and trying to not just have guys who just are a fast, good athlete, but someone, obviously all those things are stuff I want them to have, but mixed with just a knowledge base deeper than everybody else's. And that's kind of where I'm at with my current obsession with this no-gi thing. There's just no end to it. Every time you think you start to understand a position, and then you look at it from a different angle, or then you're presented with a new thought process, and you're like, oh, you know what? Yeah, the way I was thinking about it can be adjusted, and now this is the next best thing. That's the tricky thing that a lot of people can't do. They become so attached to their moves or their ideas on things that it's like, I can't let that go. And then they just, before you know it, they're getting left behind. So I think you've got to be relatively progressive, that's how we've got to live nowadays, Sonny Brown. Progressive.
Mate, that's very accurate. I mean, I think when you're saying then about getting attached to different moves and stuff like that, I feel that all the time, where there's almost a mental thing where I'm like, I might be showing a move and I have the urge to say, I learned it this way, but this is what this is what everyone's doing now. And there is just that constant updating of the techniques, where it's kind of painful to have to admit or just say that, yeah, I spent 10 years doing it like this, and then I went to a seminar with this guy and we learned that, there was a better way to do it, and so now we don't do it like that anymore. It's a process to go through that's not exactly enjoyable, but it should be. You should be able to make it a fun. Like, it should excite you that you're learning something new and are learning a better way. But I can see where people will avoid that, just to not have to face that reality of things.
Well, that's just human nature, Sonny. That's humans. We like to make things comfortable for ourselves and then just keep things in your comfort zone. That's how we survive as a species, right? Like, if you're the guy who's always like, yeah, I know we've got food here and we've got some fire and our cave's pretty good, but why don't we run over there into that plain and see what's over there? You go, no, you can do that, but you're probably going to die, and we're going to be the ones who progress forward. That's kind of like this human nature, and people for some reason can't objectively look at it and go, yeah, that might be a feeling you have, but in the long run, that's not beneficial to you, especially when applied to what we're talking about here. I just don't get it. I don't understand why people get married to their ideas to the point where it's clearly not valuable to them anymore. But I'm happy for people to do that, because it allows the free thinkers to kind of push forward while the rest of them huddle around doing Keza crushes to each other, you know?
Hey, back off on the Keza crush, mate. Let's not get personal here.
I get, so another interesting thing for me as a coach, as you start to become known by certain people in the industry of these guys are doing the right thing, what you then do is you get athletes who want to be as good as possible start to gravitate towards you. So my thing has never been to go searching for other people's athletes, because I've always been under the assumption I will just create my own. I don't need to go and try and steal other people. So poaching is something that I've never done ever. It's just because it didn't make sense to me. I'm like, if you're with someone else and you're happy, that's fine. Why would I want to come and it doesn't make sense. Anyway, but what starts to happen is as you start to do well, people will come and test the waters. They test the waters and go, shit, this is what I'm after. You then start to get some people. So we've had this in the last couple of years, this big influx of, most academies, their new students are white belts coming in off the street. Most of my students, which is probably not good for business, but most of my students are color belts coming from other places, whether it's blues, purples, browns, or blacks. And that's quite satisfying as a coach, because it's a degree of validation, because these people won't come to you just because they like you. They're coming because you can offer them something. So, but then I then have a responsibility to these guys to kind of look at their game and then deconstruct it to some degree and go, here's what I think we need to take out. Normally there's things I need to take out, and here's what I think we can put back in. And it's a very interesting thing seeing people have to wrestle with that, mentally wrestle with that idea of dropping out things that maybe they've even had success with for a long period of time. And I need to go, look, okay, that's fine. You've had success with it, but it's stalling these other parts of your game. How about we drop it out for a bit and let's push this in? And it's hard because they've got to have faith in you that you're doing the right thing for them. And I think they realize, well, wait a sec, he wouldn't ask me to do something that's going to make me worse. That doesn't make sense here. So as long as they can, jump into the water as far as that's concerned and trust that the water's the level that I need them to jump into, after a little bit, they'll even regress for a little bit because they're not getting those taps that they can get with their moves. And then they'll start to come up and they'll come back past that baseline, and they keep then stacking on top of that. And it's always an interesting thing because you get a grappler who's won many tournaments and he's a black belt or a brown belt, and then here I am saying, look, I think that move's rubbish. You need to put that away and let's go to this. That's, a really interesting part of it, because I have no problem doing it to someone else because I did it to my own game. I got my black belt 6 years ago, just over 6 years ago now. And basically a black belt, I pretty much dropped everything I was doing before and had to remaster it, like it's like an old movie where they get hold of it and they put new audio and they put there was some bones there, but there was plenty of things that had to come out. And so I got no problem saying to someone else, look, I've gone through this, but if you can trust that process, in the end, you're going to have a better product and you're going to enjoy everything a lot more. So it's I keep saying it, but it's so intriguing. It's such a puzzle that I see all this putting together, and it's really fun to watch it unfold. And I'm really excited to see whether what I'm doing pays off. Come the trials, there's only one winner in each division. I don't care how much you believe, achieve, want it, all that's bullshit. It's going to come down to, on that day, who was the best grappler. And I'm obviously hoping that not only we can take out single divisions, but multiple divisions. And that will kind of be a bit of a validation stamp saying, you guys can think you're good, but now you've proven that you're good. So I'm looking forward to the ADCC trials coming up.
I love that spirit of competition that you have, obviously. And talking about then the dropping the gi, and with the amount of techniques and having to update your own game, I would imagine that removing the gi from your program would allow you to focus more solely on the techniques that are going to be most important for no gi, and not waste that time on perhaps, worm guard or something like that has no applicable crossover. So was it really just part of that, also that focus of it's just going to allow you to go deeper in the direction that you want to go?
Yeah. So the way I looked at it was, any time we were using where someone was getting used to a grip on the pants or getting used to a sleeve grip or any time they were doing that, there was a negative reinforcement. It wasn't a positive reinforcement. It wasn't making their grappling better because they were just doing grappling. It was taking them down a direction that wasn't of use to them. A fantastic example, if you watch Nicholas Meregali compete in his first no-gi match on Who's Number One. You talk to most people, Nicholas is right at the top end of gi grappling from my understanding. I could be wrong because I don't follow it like other guys do, but I'm pretty sure Nicholas is a 2-time world champion in the gi. He's definitely beaten a lot of very good guys. And he switched to no-gi, which is exciting in itself. That's great to see a big name cross over from one side to the other. And not only that, but he's also committed himself 100% to trying to go to who he believes is the best team. And I think is the best team because I did the same thing when I decided to focus 100% on this. He went to John and Gordon. But if I'm being honest, and we watched his match, he definitely looks like a guy who's not quite as buttoned down yet with the technique choices and just the way the game moves compared to how he would move in the gi. So it's two totally different things. Anyone that wants to still believe that if you wear the gi, you're just going to become really good in no gi, you will to a level. So Nicholas is better than your average blue belt. He training at someone's gym. That's not like, he's obviously fantastic. But if we're talking about the absolute best way to prepare to become the best no-gi grappler, I just don't think there's any argument anymore that you should be wearing a kimono. I always use the analogy. Nobody in the NRL, in rugby league, the Australian Football League, or that's AFL, but, for anyone listening that's not Australian, rugby league is kind of like the main football game. Nobody's wanting to be a first grade NRL football player, but training rugby union rules every day. And even though they're both similar looking games, you've got to kind of focus on what your art is. And I feel like no gi and gi are just totally two separate things. Whereas before it was like, it's all jiu-jitsu and one's just got a jacket, one doesn't. That was the case because there wasn't that many different technique selections that people were doing. Most guys were just doing their gi stuff without the gi, just exchanging some grips. But there's so much more to it now. It's so much more intricate. And guys, because people have committed 100% and because there's money to be made in it now, guys can do that. So that's the other thing. You've got to be able to, what's the point in putting a whole bunch of money into something and time if there's no return for it? So it had to get to a point where there was a monetary return. And that's the other thing that's assisted no-gi is that, if we're being honest, if it comes to professional grappling that people want to watch, it's not gi grappling. People can argue that all they like, but all of the shows that are actually got subscriptions and people watching them that are grappling are not in the gi. Now, gi purists might be going and finding ones that are just gi, but they're few and far between. So, clearly no gi is a direction people are interested in. And I think it's only going to become bigger, and I think the gap's going to become wider. And I think if you're still utilizing the kimono and anticipating you're going to do well in no-gi, I think you're going to leave yourself behind. So, I think we've already seen that. I don't think there's any more argument to be had, but maybe you've got an argument for me, Sonny, that I'm missing here.
I do, of course. It's actually, I was recently speaking to Robert Deagle, and he made the case that it wasn't necessarily so much about the technical side of grips and no grips, and using the lapel and that sort of thing. But it was more that the gi game had the overarching points-based scoring style that emphasized the passing, mounting, the traditional jiu-jitsu pathway that actually allows people to develop a more overall game or rewards them to develop a more overall game. Whereas in no-gi sub-only specifically, people can fall down that leg lock only trap and just, do a style of jiu-jitsu that perhaps doesn't focus on, solid positional work and in particular just dropping back on legs. And he said that and I might be doing the argument injustice, you'd be able to listen to this one, but the overarching drive of people wanting to win the mundials and that focus that can filter down into the gyms on that IBJJF point system has a net positive benefit on people who are training the gi.
I respectfully disagree with Mr. Deagle. I don't think that's a modality problem. That's people training incorrectly. That's not anything to do with the uniform. He's the argument he's making there, because ADCC is much more difficult positionally to score than it is at any IBJJF tournament. IBJJF, if I make a guy turtle, I get some points out of that. I get an advantage, which is the same as points.
Advantage.
Let's call it 1 point. Like it's the same thing. We're just calling it an advantage instead of a point. I don't know why, but it's the same thing. It's much more difficult. So if I'm preparing my team under ADCC rules and I'm holding them accountable, which every good coach should, if I see one of my students who cannot pass the guard and only sits back on the legs, I'm tearing that guy in half because I'm saying, mate, you don't have a jiu-jitsu game. You're just sitting back into the legs. And again, I can say all this because I've been through it all. I've been through it. I've got experience. I've been sitting back on legs since I was a blue belt. And so that's not an argument for why the gi gives you a different style of jiu-jitsu, because if I prepare my training room correctly, and this is funny, like maybe it's a bit of a side topic, but people come to our training room here and they think we're just going to do leg locks to them. My Instagram handle's Leglock Luke. Also, it's Leglock Luke Oz, which I hate, but Leglock Luke is owned by a fucking guy who has like 3 horse photos on his profile, and he doesn't even use it. And I don't even know why he's Leglock Luke, but he doesn't even do jiu-jitsu or anything. Anyway, if anyone can sort that out for me, I would appreciate it. We need to get rid of this guy. I don't know how to do it. I haven't actually approached him. Maybe I just ask him nicely. I'm not sure. Anyway, people rock up here and they're like, and it's the same thing at Henzo's, right? People went to Henzo's initially and went, oh, they're just going to do leg locks. And then they rock up and then they just beat you up with guard passing, taking the back, mounting. And you go, all right, they're actually doing more than just doing leg locks. It's just maybe I see that in tournaments because it's like I play my best card. If that's going to win me the match, well, why bother playing a not so good card? That doesn't make sense. Like if I've got an ace here and I know that's going to win me the match, I just play that and we move forward. So people get this false sense of, oh, guys just sit back in the legs. I think that's just people who are naive to understanding exactly what's going on. Now, Robert Deagle's not, so I'm not sure why he's making that argument, but I think that's a flaw in the training room, not in the uniform of the students. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
So because ADCC, if you study ADCC, you have to have phenomenal control to be able to score on people under those rules. So if I coach a training room under ADCC rules, which is a no-gi tournament, not a gi tournament, applying the logic there, they're going to have a better positional game than if I just tried to train them under IBJJF. If you're applying that as your logic, which I don't think is the right logic, I think it's about how you train your room. It's not about the uniform. The uniform, you see what I'm saying there?
I understand completely what you're saying.
You don't agree, but you understand.
No,
you don't have to agree either.
We can transition onto the talk about wrestling shoes. I think we will agree on some points, and I don't want to just rehash Robert's argument because I'll probably miss some points, but I think one of the main things he was putting forward there in terms of the ability to create the culture in the room and the ability of a coach to do that is that was going to be hampered in some point by the rule systems that are put in place by the sport, that the scoring criteria would at points overwhelm what some coaches would be able to do, which maybe in some situations, but I do think that the goal of a good coach should be to impart the style and the ability to impart the style of training that you want on your students.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see the opposite trend when I see someone who's come from a very heavy IBJJF background. I actually see a very restricted version of jiu-jitsu that tends to be more stalling based and less technical because they narrow down so much what you have to do to actually become a world champion. I actually think they leave so much jiu-jitsu on the table that it's a negative. I think that argument has no weight to it whatsoever. I mean, you look at these guys who are world champions, most of them don't know. If you looked at jiu-jitsu as a pie chart, they know like fucking a quarter of the pie chart maybe. But that's enough to win your world championship if you're a fantastic athlete and the moves you do know, you're very good at and can execute them at the highest level and you score from those moves. Like most of these guys have 1 or 2 moves that win them all their matches. It's like high-level wrestling. It's the same thing. Like those guys aren't throwing out every wrestling technique in the book. They're pretty much it's CATFs that were known for their inside trips. Like, for instance, that's most high-level guys have 1 or 2 things as their go-to move. You see that in IBJJF all the time. You want to be an ADCC champ, a lot of the time you've got to have some more options in your arsenal. And again, coming back to the coaching, I feel like I have a responsibility to create a well-rounded grappler. So when it goes to a position that we didn't anticipate, or there shouldn't be any positions we didn't anticipate, but a position that maybe we didn't want, I still know he's going to be fine there. It can't be like, oh shit, he's under mount. Jesus, we're done now. Like you see these guys, these world champions, they get their back taken and they don't even hand fight. They just tap. They're like, the match is over. They're like, I just don't even, on the back, they're like a white belt. I'm not speaking for everybody here because I can't, obviously that wouldn't be fair to say, but you see it often. It's a very specific meta to win in IBJJF. It's like bottom position, you've got to be to sweep, and top position, you've got to be to stay on top and force an advantage more often than not. Like there's not many guys doing a full breadth of positional training, the positional mixed in with submissions. But anyway, we've kind of talked about that subject, and I'm sure some people are just never going to change their stance on it. But I think like when I explain it like that, hopefully people can at least understand that if you've got someone who just sits back on the legs and that's all they know how to do, shame on them and shame on their coach because they're not doing the right things.
Yeah, I think that's fair that the responsibility can be placed on the coach as well to kind of create an environment where the training's tailored to how they want to see a complete grappler or a complete martial artist evolve. And I think this can bring up the point of the wrestling shoes because it is something I've thought about.
Bring it on, Sonny. Bring it on.
So I think with the topic of the gi and no gi, what that we were just discussing then, it kind of comes down to the influences that are placed external from the training environment and then the internal influences of the coach and their ability to develop a culture within their training academy. Now, the first thing I'd say is obviously if someone's for the wrestling shoes, if someone's doing wrestling and they're doing wrestling for wrestling, then the shoes are obviously, requirement for the sport, and that's what you wear. So you should put them on. I think you'd probably agree with that, right?
Yeah, I think I'd be a moron to disagree with that. Wrestling as a sport, so if we're talking freestyle or we're talking folk style collegiate wrestling, part of the uniform of that specific sport is that you must wear the shoes. If you planned on preparing without shoes to be good at that sport, you're falling in the same track I just spoke about wearing a gi to do no gi or vice versa. So my argument remains the same. So there's no issues there. The thing that I taught, and you're probably going to get to this, most people are not preparing to go and actually do wrestling competitions in wrestling shoes. Most of them are doing wrestling because they want to improve their grappling or jiu-jitsu or because they want to fight in mixed martial arts.
Yeah, that's fair. And I'd probably say that that's the main point of difference where we might have. And I would say that the adaptation of takedowns into jiu-jitsu, particularly the no-gi game, seems to be an area that has been somewhat neglected in recent years or so, as people have just found it easier to perhaps pull guard or just not spend the time working on those positions. And so it seems that, a lot of academies just won't even spend the time working their wrestling at all. Is that something that you've seen around happening?
Yeah. So it's a good talking point because it's something that I think about a lot. When I first went to train with John Danaher at Henzo's in New York, what I realized was they did 2 sessions most days, right? And in the second session, the lunchtime session, John would actually, during the beginning component of the session, would only teach standing options. So I don't think wrestling is the right term to use because it's a hybrid of just techniques from standing, because wrestling makes you think less about, the idea is that you may even transition to submission positions from a standing position, right? So whether it's, moving your Kimura attacks or front headlock guillotine attacks. So rather than, I don't think it's fair I don't like to just call it wrestling as such. I think just calling it, standing position, because the goal is just to submit the guy still, even if I'm putting him down. But I realized, wait a sec, this guy is putting a large proportion of their training time into improving their ability to wrestle. So when I first went there, I rocked up thinking these guys all do leg locks. And then I realized, oh, wait a sec, they actually are really good positionally. And then I was like, oh, they also focus on standing position, because you always just see them pull to bottom position. And obviously John realized that to make a well-rounded grappler, they need to be good at everything. Now, there's a few limitations to teaching standing position all the time. One is just space in the room. If you've got a mat space that's busy and, lots of people, obviously the more standing takedowns you do, falling bodies, people can land on top of each other. I do see injuries tend to be higher when we're incorporating feet to floor than when we just start on the floor. So, for instance, I don't like having fundamentals start standing because I just think they're already learning. They're a bit clumsy. They're a bit, all over the shop. And then they fall on each other's knees. Like, there's no benefit to them learning jiu-jitsu if they've got a busted LCL in their first few sessions. So I think that there's a huge utility to teaching people standing components of grappling, but there's also a high degree of danger. So I sort of choose when and where it should be implemented. So, for instance, the fundamentals class that I do, every single week, I have one takedown that during their warm-up, they will always practice. So they do it under drilling situations. But I want someone, if they only did fundamentals, they should at least understand standing position. It wouldn't make sense that you say, I've done 6 months of fundamentals here with Luke, and I don't know what a double leg is. I think that's a fundamental movement they should know for grappling. So I think some gyms have gone away from it because you can become a world champion and not know how to do a takedown. So I think a lot of gyms are like, well, why bother teaching it? But then it comes back to that circle that I keep speaking about. I want to have the most well-rounded grappler. So no matter where this match goes, I know they're good to go. And it's actually, you know what? It's a way to keep it fun. A lot of these people get bored with their grappling because they've hyper-focused down one direction so far that they haven't left themselves that many more things to work on. Like, if you get to a point where you're like, you complete a computer game. Call of Duty, I finished it. There's no point playing it again. I finished it. If you get to a point where you're doing that with your jiu-jitsu, we're like, look, I can submit everyone from my guard. It's like, okay, but can you pass everybody? Can you hold the back on everyone? Can you mount everyone? I just feel like it's too difficult to be maybe Gordon can say he's completed it, but like other than that, I don't think anyone can say that. So it's a way to keep it interesting, I find as well. But to come back to the whole takedowns thing, once I realized John was doing this hybrid of wrestling and judo, I was like, okay, this is something that's valuable. And I now have a certain responsibility towards my students where if anybody comes into this training room, I want my better students to start standing with that person, and I want them to be able to do well in the standing position. I don't care who it is. So we've got one of our top black belts in the gym is Ethan Thomas. Ethan also happens to be the top wrestler in Australia for his weight class for like the last however many years. So again, people might have this sort of idea in their head that, Sydney West just do leg locks. But if you come in here, there's plenty of the guys that are going in the standing position with you and will out wrestle you. We've got Mark Grayson, who's MMA guy and actually prefers to wrestle with people. So I try to get the guys understanding takedowns, but I think there's the standing part of grappling, I should say. But I think there's a time and a place. So, for instance, I tend to teach the fundamentals class one takedown each week, but they only do it in drilling. I teach the advanced class standing position. Most nights we start with standing position. And then the intermediate session I use for teaching the bulk of jiu-jitsu. And the bulk of jiu-jitsu happens to be on the floor. So we would do a small amount of standing times. But if you wanted to really get to the point where you're like getting the most out of the training sessions, you would kind of do 2 or potentially 3 of the sessions to get a fairly, the width of what I want to get across to you. I think I can see how some gyms go away from it. Maybe they're worried about injuries and maybe even from a financial perspective, they think, well, if I've got injured students, that's not good financially, but it's also just not good for people in general. Your average hobbyist that wants to come in, does he want to take the chance of substantially increasing his opportunity of blowing his knee out or his ankle versus just sitting on his butt and having a wrestle? That's up to the individual. So I don't make anybody start standing, but I definitely, when we come time to do rounds, I'll be like standing position, and I want the higher belts for a proportion of their training working on their takedowns at least, especially because we keep talking about ADCC. You have to be able to work the standing position even if you want to be a guard player, because it's going to get to a point in the match where you're not allowed to pull guard anymore. And what are you going to do now? So again, for me to create a team who's going to do well at ADCC, if I was leaving takedowns and standing position out of the formula, I'm making huge mistakes. So yeah, I more and more, I put a lot of work into it. But when it comes to a time for a tournament, you might see one of my guys just pull guard and you go, they don't know how to wrestle. Well, that's a misconception on your behalf, not on actually what the students are capable of doing. It depends on the match, depends on the opponent. Like when it comes to a match, it's just about winning. It's not about me showing you everything that student knows. During the match, it's about just winning. And then during the training room, it's about me giving them so many tools that depending on how the match needs to be played, they can pull the trigger on whatever game plan is required. Yeah, I don't know if that answers that question that we were talking about, Sonny, but As far as the wrestling shoes are concerned, did you want me to elaborate specifically on the wrestling shoes?
Let's just mention, because I think, you've covered that area pretty well. And I think, as you make reference to John Danaher, his latest interview with Joe Rogan, I think he discussed, the cultural change in takedowns needing to have an emphasis on it in jiu-jitsu training as well as one of the things that needed to be fixed, so to speak. And also I noticed your guys have had some good takedowns and wrestling in competition. And of course, Ethan Thomas just made Commonwealth Games selection as well.
Yeah, so that was the Oceania trials. So I don't know if that's got him into the Com Games. I think there's another thing they have to do, which got postponed recently, I think. But yeah, he's Commonwealth Games material for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's definitely a level of competence there. The thing I would point to I would say one utility of, let's say, wrestling shoes is really having it come in a change of culture in a particular class and the ability to facilitate that within a club. Whereas if you have a class on that is just wrestling for wrestling, it's a dedicated time where you're putting on the wrestling shoes. That's what wrestlers do, competing and training under wrestling rules. Then it can help allow the culture of stand-up grappling and wrestling to cross over into people's games when they go to train submission grappling, so to speak. So it can act as a kind of catalyst for that cultural change to see more wrestling go into submission grappling. But I think you're probably going to say you could just do that anyway.
You're applying Robert Deagle's exact same argument with the gi. You're applying the same gi. You're saying that, and I just explained before why I think it's a fallacy, right? And I'm not trying to be argumentative. I'm just trying to explain like what I think here. At the end of the day, if you want to compete under wrestling rules, by all means, go and wear that uniform, wear the shoes. If you are going to compete, if you're trying to learn wrestling as in go to a wrestling class, you're trying to learn wrestling to get better takedowns for grappling or for mixed martial arts, neither of those sports wear that attire. So you're putting the shoes definitely change the way you can grip, the way you can drive, the way that you can grip somebody else's foot and keep control of a leg that you absolutely can't keep control of when you're both dripping with sweat. It's a totally different thing. The way I can work a 2-on-1 on a shoe versus 2-on-1 on a foot is totally different. The way I can hit a swing single or sweep single and come up behind and connect to the front of the shoelaces and bring his foot up in a shoe versus not, the way I can hit drive with the shoes, it is back to the same argument as the gi. I don't want to rehash it again, but I just don't see. So I understand what you're saying. You're trying to say that immersing yourself in that's going to make, but I truly believe you can be better by doing exactly what we're going. Apply those wrestling tactics. I'm not saying don't do wrestling. What I'm saying is wear the uniform that you're going to wear when you go live, because that's going to be the tools you're going to battle with. Don't fucking practice with a sword when you're going into battle unarmed. That doesn't make any sense. That's not going to be useful.
Yes, I think that's reasonable to state. I would think that in some respects, it probably is the same argument as the gi versus no gi in terms of it being an external influence that is overriding the internal culture of a training room environment. But with the gi versus no gi, it's really more like the points and the scoring and everything like that. With the takedowns as such, or let's say wrestling, it's not just takedowns. With the wrestling, it is 2 points has always been awarded in IBJJF for takedowns. It's always been there as an incentive. And, same with takedown points for ADCC. It's always been there. And of course, ADCC has more favored wrestlers in the past.
Well, you have to just keep in mind for ADCC, if you put them into a turtle, you don't score 2 points.
So you got a pin.
Mm-hmm.
So it has had that favoritism. But yet there's still a situation where John Danaher has said that, a cultural change has to occur for that to happen?
I think trying to affect cultural change is like pushing shit up a hill with a garden rake. It's nice to say that we as individuals can change things, but that's generally not the case. I worry about my area of influence. My area of influence is my specific academy. So I don't look and go, I hope to change everyone's mind on wrestling shoes. Everybody can go and buy 10 pairs of wrestling shoes. Wear them to the nightclub. I don't care. Wear them everywhere. People will think you're a fighter. Get some cauliflower ears. You'll be going well. But my training room, don't rock up expecting to wear training shoes because it's not going to assist you. There's three things as well I hate about them. One is they destroy mats. They pull apart the top surface of the mat where they're glued. All the mats if you have a look at people who have had wrestling shoes on mats a lot, the mats have like bubbles and rips everywhere from wrestling shoes. Two, they're shoes. So people treat them like shoes. The hobbyist who comes in, he stopped at the servo to grab himself a Red Bull on the way to training. He wore the shoes in there. He's like, I know what I know. He comes in here. He walks in from the car. He's like, it's only a quick walk. And then I'm going to have those shoes in my face, right? Those shoes never get cleaned. They never get washed. Some of them, at least the kimono gets washed. Like the wrestling shoes never get washed until they fall apart. Wrestlers are like historically the most disgusting humans on earth. And then third, they cause injuries because of the extra grip they have. When feet get stuck and knees get put outside of ankles, sometimes in no shoe situations, the foot has a degree of slide. When there's shoes, there's no slide. And I see most guys in MMA that bust their knees in the training room, it happened in a wrestling exchange, and often they were wearing wrestling shoes because their foot couldn't move where it needed to go. I think they are so stupid. I think it makes no sense unless you are preparing to compete. It'd be like, well, let's just say, let's wear the gi for wrestling training. That'd be useful, right? We think wearing random uniforms is useful for some reason. Let's wear like a fucking gi for wrestling training because it's going to make it a bit tighter and they can't scramble as much. Like you can apply whatever logic you want, and that's fine. But I'm just worried about my training room, and I'm just explaining my thoughts via that. I think people get this. Like a lot of my guys will come to me at some stage and go, I want to get better at wrestling. I should just go do wrestling, right? And I'd say, well, doing some wrestling versus doing zero wrestling will make you better at wrestling, sure. But there's always going to become a negative with that. Anytime you're putting into that, you're not putting into something else, and there's potential for injury or whatever. And there's going to be like, where do you cross over and blend the techniques? So the way I see it, my job as a coach is to try and do that legwork for the student. Which takedowns do I think are most efficient, effective at ADCC? Which have been proven to be the best? And teach the reactions that a grappler should give, not a wrestler. Wrestlers give reactions based on their rules, same as a grappler will. But we're preparing people to become good grapplers, not good wrestlers. And I know this doesn't fit necessarily with you because I know you teach a lot of freestyle wrestling, and I'm not saying that's wrong. Or
Folk style,
sorry. My mistake. How dare I? Heathen freestyle wrestling that everybody in the world does except for Americans. Anyway, how stupid locking your hands together. That'd never work. Where was I going with that? So I know like this is like a topic that's also close to your heart, but I suppose it comes back to like what I've said before, holding on to things because of there's like nationalistic pride. Like does it serve a purpose or not? Like it's like, am I just connected this because this is what I like to do? Or is there actually a utility for it? And I know you can try to shoehorn and a utility for it in there, but I've kind of explained why I don't think those shoehorns necessarily fit. And maybe we don't agree on this, and that's totally fine. Hopefully what you'll see is when my guys need to wrestle or defensively wrestle, that they can show that my idea of this training modality is right. John doesn't have guys wearing wrestling shoes. I know Gordon went and tried, so Gordon had Kyle Surmia.
Yeah.
I don't know how to pronounce Kyle's surname exactly.
Yeah.
Surmia.
Surmia, I think.
Yeah. And he's a very good wrestler.
Long Island guy, yeah.
Yeah, and he was in the training room at Henzo's for a long time. And I know Gordon did a lot of work with him. I don't know how often Gordon went and put on wrestling boots and did just wrestling, though. Like, he might have just because that was like a way to get some training with Kyle. But generally, I saw those guys working in the training room no one wore wrestling shoes at Henzo's anyway. I'm not saying it just because this is what John does. This is just what I believe. And I think between the injuries that they cause, between the grossness of them, between the damage they cause, and then the lack of utility for the actual martial art that I want my guys to do, it's a no-brainer. I think it makes zero sense at all. But I'm open to your retort, Sonny, if I've missed something.
No, I think, well, wash your shoes, first of all.
Sonny, you can say that. You've been around wrestling for a while. How many of them wash their shoes?
I mean, probably about as many guys as jiu-jitsu people wash their belts, I'll say that. The hygiene aside, I think what you're saying is, if you do just want to compete in submission grappling and you have the training partners and the culture available where you can improve on your wrestling with your current setup, then for sure. I think that's, of course, if you have that facility available to you and there is that culture where people are competent wrestlers, they're working on it every day, then for sure. My case would be that if that's not the case, then maybe to go work with good wrestlers, you might have to go put on the shoes and go train at a wrestling club. Maybe that's your only option to get some high-level experience. And there I would say it would be worth it. If your option is just floundering around with no direct instruction for decent wrestling, or going to visit, high-level wrestlers who wear wrestling boots and expect you to do the same, then put them on.
Like the wrestling foundation?
I'm not going to turn this into a plug. I'm not going to.
Is this where we're going, Sonny? What are they called? I forgot.
Wrestling Foundation.
The Wrestling Foundation.
But that is more for, then that's possible too. But it's also the previous argument of making that cultural change and, bringing wrestling necessarily, or wrestling for wrestling as an option for people, and then having that as a good facility to have change the culture, so to speak. It's possible that a dedicated coach would be able to work the technical and cultural changes into their current academy, but it does give that distinction that would enable people to train, get that wrestling experience, and actually change how they perceive grappling as a whole. And so there I would say that those are the options. And maybe it's somewhat similar to the gi versus no gi situation, where probably, 10 or so years ago, to get good training, at least let's just say for me personally, there were just more people training in the gi than no gi. And so for the wider variety of training partners, I would put the gi on and there'd be much more people to train with, and people who are good grapplers and everything like that I could get work in with. And maybe now with the rise of no gi, there's less of that necessity, but there was still excellent grapplers that you could train with that wouldn't train no gi. But by training with them, I was still improving my game as a grappler, no matter what.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I actually think the statements you just made bolstered what I was saying. What you're saying is, in an ideal situation, you train specifically for that sport you're preparing for, but you're saying you're looking at it I'm looking at it from the point of view where I'm the coach of a training room and I can implement exactly what I want.
Mm-hmm.
And you're looking at it for like the average dude listening that can't control that. He can't go to his coach and say, hey, really fucking learn wrestling and judo so you can teach me. For that individual, he's got to go, okay, well, maybe I need to source something outside of that. And if I do that, I'm going to have to meet the requirements of their training room, which happens to be a slightly different rule set and different uniform, but I'm going to try and shoehorn that to fit my game. I get it. I totally get it. But I'm saying in a vacuum, because that's how I can look at it, because I can make real-time adjustments to benefit my training room immediately. I just don't see any utility in it. So I actually think we're kind of agreeing with each other, unless I'm missing that. Yeah.
No, we are, but it's still a good conversation to have, no matter what, because it's essentially there's like upstream and downstream influences where you're able to control, directly what's in front of you, and then there's other things which are, well, you are influenced by your surroundings and what's happening on at a different level, and we're both arguing from different perspectives, which I think is always that's the world we live in. We makes for
it's great. And I can come across pretty bombastic and, even arrogant, Nelly, but I'm taking on 100% of what you're saying. I'm just putting it through the filters of what I want at the end, which is to make the best no-gi grappler. And unfortunately, I don't start with wrestling shoes and end up with that makes the best no-gi grappler. There's something between there that's missing for me. And I'm not trying to say everyone else has it. I actually hope everyone else just wears wrestling shoes. It's fantastic, because when my guys get hold of them, they're going to have a whole bunch of holes in their game. This is great. Everyone should wear wrestling shoes is what I should be saying. But yeah, you get the idea of what I'm saying there anyway.
I get you. No, I get you completely.
Yeah.
And your ability to influence that culture, again, like I've seen your guys wrestling there, and your ability to influence your culture and your dedication to taking control and building, the training room that you envision is something that I think is evident throughout all your work. And certainly within our last interview where we were talking about your private lessons that you were getting online with Jason Rao before people even knew what, Zoom or Google Meet and all that stuff was. And that effort that you were going in to bring in the latest techniques into your training room and making sure that it was going to meet your requirements and not necessarily what someone else's idea of what the jiu-jitsu you should be doing look like. You really took that effort to go out and source it yourself. And again, I do want to stress that people were not really looking to do that, even though the technology was available.
Yeah.
So it really went to that extra effort. And I think you are, coming up, you're going over to America again to visit some training rooms over there.
Yep.
So I'm wondering, how has that relationship with Jason Rao progressed? And, those, what started as the training sessions now moving into, a more longer term thing where we can see your guys being successful in competitions with the stuff that you're bringing in. And then, what's the plan for going into the different training environments when you go over there?
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. It's a good question. And, to touch on some of the things you were saying, I think my mentality and my attitude of how I approach anything, if I think something is worth me dedicating to, I'm going to dedicate to it 100%. Now, a lot of people say that and then they don't. They dedicate for a week or two and then they move to the next shiny object that catches their eye. I don't do that. And then I'm lucky enough that something that I really enjoy and obsessed about, I could eventually create into a career as such. But if I was going to do it, I wasn't happy just plodding along and just being another gym that's there and people can come in and maybe they can learn to defend themselves if they get in a fight, hopefully. Maybe that being your main motive. Not there's anything wrong with that motive. I'm just saying mine was, well, if I can make guys who are like the absolute best, well, they're probably going to be able to defend themselves in a fight. If they can't, there's something wrong there. If they're the absolute best at this thing that I think is a valuable martial art and they still can't help themselves in a fight. So the idea is that I'm still going to cover that side of things. Why not try to be the very pointy end? And that's kind of how I looked at it. So I've looked for a long time and realized just following along the footsteps of your previous coach, and for me it was coaches, I had Elvis and Anthony, and just following along their footsteps wasn't necessarily going to fire me into another stratosphere. I was going to be limited by their knowledge base. So there wasn't access to information like it is now. I think we spoke about this before. I mean, people now have actually nearly more access to information than they can get through. So the biggest problem for people now is not access to the information. It's about vetting what information you require, or as a coach, what information you're going to be trickling down to your team. And I think that's where people are struggling now. There's so much just it's nearly the same as not having the information, remember back in the day, there was just Eddie Bravo's Rubber Guard DVD and you just watch that,
right. Mate, I can repeat all the lines.
Yeah,
come on.
Yeah. With Joey Diaz in his karate uniform and a big fat guy. Anyway, it's kind of like the same as food now, when humans first started, you'd die of starvation. And now people are dying because they're so fat they can't even get off their own lounge. It's kind of like this. We're at that point with the jiu-jitsu where there's so much that people have got an overload. I'm not going to say lucky because it's not about luck. I saw that John and his team were the guys I had to learn from, that I personally wanted to. It was their style that attracted me. And then the way John explained things, which now has made him the number one coach in the world. I think he's got more students than anyone in the entire world does. If you actually think about it like that, I don't know who would have more students than John Danaher.
More number one, did you say, or?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see who would have more students than John. Think about it. People might be saying they're coaches is their local brown belt or black belts running their gym, but most of them are getting their information from John. So like John's probably got more students than anyone else in the world, even though he doesn't even have a gym, which is pretty insane. So I think it's got to a point where people are attracted to his methodology of teaching and the way he approaches grappling. So it's just cool to see that validated, because I kind of saw this earlier in the piece. But it's like anything, like it doesn't matter whether you said, oh, Bitcoin was a good idea back in whenever 2012, unless you actually bought some. So I put my money where my mouth was, and I did it. I was like, okay, I scrounged up the money to be able to go. And I thought, this is so valuable, I have to do it, right? So I went the first time to Henzo's. I'm not going to rehash the whole thing, but I did become buddies with Jason. And like now we're good friends. We text all the time. We're buddies, but also like there's the training relationship. And I'm really lucky that I met Jason, because most people didn't know who he was at that stage. He's kind of getting to a point now where there's a bit of a cult following with Jay, where guys that are in jiu-jitsu and know, they go, oh yeah, this guy is really good. But that wasn't the case when I started. I just met him in the training room. I'd seen some of his stuff, and I was like, I'm sure we seem similar, like we can get along here. And, it happened to be a very good connection, obviously. And, I can't thank him enough, because John hadn't been putting out instructionals yet. So the only source of knowledge that I had, just going to America for 2 weeks, so I don't care if you go for 2 months, unless you're doing this every day and constantly getting the information, you're going to stall. Like you're going to end up filling the gaps with your own stupid ideas, and it's not going to work. So I realized that just going for 2 weeks wasn't going to be enough. I bring back 2 weeks worth of lessons, and then what? Then what do we do? So like, there's all these guys that are like, oh, he went and trained at Henzo's. It's like, yeah, but who cares? He did 2 weeks at Henzo's. That doesn't mean anything. So I recognized that. I recognized that the bucket was going to empty unless I kept filling it. And I made that connection with Jay. And it's funny, no one was doing online privates. I just said to Jay, do you reckon we can do this? Like, I think, and it was hard. It was really hard, because he was introducing me to ideas and moves that I hadn't even seen or done. And then he's trying to walk me through it. And I got an Uke who doesn't have any idea what they're doing. And I don't understand it either. And I go back and watch privates from him from like 2017 when we started. And I listen to some of the things I'm saying. I'm like, Jesus Christ, you fucking idiot. You didn't know anything. But I thought, oh, I'm a black belt. I'm not bad at jiu-jitsu. I knew nothing. Like I knew. And ideally, in another 5 years, I look back at me now and think I'm a complete idiot as well. I think if you're making progression in any part of your life like you should look back at 5 years ago and think you're an idiot. I think that's probably a good indicator you're progressing at some degree of forward, rate. So, but what I will say is I'm at a point now where I feel like I understand the foundations and fundamentals. And once you understand that, you can then start to apply problem-solving strategies, and you can start to actually feed yourself instead of someone having to bring you the fish, So I know there's a lot of words there, but like from that first trip till now, my own progression has been massive. And by extension of that, my team's progression has been massive. So that's super exciting for me. And then now this is the first time I'm gone back in 2 years because of all the COVID rubbish. I came back in March of 2020 when it all started to go crazy. I was in New York then and got back. And then it was just, we know the story since then, lockdown after lockdown and whatever. So this is my first time going back in 2 whole years. And I'm actually really excited because I'm in a position where I'm ready to receive information at such a faster rate. So rather than being like, oh, what mount escape should I do? It's like, look, here's specifically the mount escape I do, and he reacts this way. How can I deal with that? And we can just cover like so much more information and so much more precise stuff. And at the higher levels, that's the difference between someone who's really good and someone who's, okay. So I'm pretty excited about this trip coming up just because I feel like I'm primed to learn better. I'm also excited because this is the first time that I'm having to split the trip because John and Gordon are in Austin and Jay's in Long Island. So I'll be flying into Austin, spending a week there, and then flying across the country to spend a week with Jay. Even though before I split my time between Henzo's and Sarah's, so I was kind of doing it, but it was just closer. I think potentially this time I can get even more out of it being in Texas there with John and the team, and then going and totally being separate and then having Jay and his team and how he does it. So yeah, it's going to be good. If anyone wants to follow my Instagram, I'm going to try and do my best to keep everyone in the loop of what I'm up to. It's kind of hopefully can kind of be fun and motivating for people. And I think it's perfect timing. I'm going to come back with definitely a lot of just information to assist the team fine-tune before our ADCC trials in June.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of things I want to talk to John and Gordon about specific to ADCC that are tactics, and so not necessarily jiu-jitsu skills, but just tactics on how to deal with certain situations. And I'm starting to realize once you've now got the building blocks in front of you and you've built a good grappler, he also needs a bunch of tactics and in boxing they call it ring craft to win matches. It can't just be his skill set.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I mean, that is the role of a good coach, is that ability to game plan and implement those things. So you are going to go to Texas, visit New Wave over there. And of course that's with the connections that you've built. A lot of the guys from Australia now are going over to B Team to train with Craig. Do you think that, you're going to visit in there, or are you just solely going to go on New Wave?
I get the same question from everyone in regards to this. First of all, I like the guys at B Team. I know a lot of the guys there. I mean, Isaac Michelle trained with me for nearly a year here as effectively as one of our students and top grapplers. So I know those guys well. I know Craig reasonably well. I trained with all the guys that are there when I've been at Henzo's before. But the way I look at it in my mind, it's very simple. I never went to Henzo's to go and train with all those guys individually. I went to train with John, and then it was a trickle down. The training room was under John. It doesn't make sense to me that I would change that strategy now. I'm not convinced that's going to assist me in any way. So then the next thing is, well, why not do both, right? And the way I look at it, without going into the politics of what went down there, I don't think it would be fair to come in and just play both sides of the field. I don't think that's fair. So I think what the correct thing for me is to, choose who it is that I need to go and train with and go and train with those guys. So as much as I'd love to see the B Team guys and say hi to Isaac and whatever, the reality is when I go on these trips, it's nothing social. Like, I mean, I'm social with Jay because we're good friends, but at the end of the day, the main thing is trying to gather as much information so that I can come back and assist my team to be better. It's a very simple goal. Going out and having beers after training doesn't push towards that for me. So if I've finished training, I'm going back to my room to have a shower, to eat some food and rest till the next training session comes so that I can have my mind. So there's no social aspect for me, even though it sounds a bit silly, because it's such a magnified 2-week process. I can't go for 6 months at a time. I have to make the most out of it. So for me, the way I'm going to do that is I get a full week at every session and be in front of John and Gordon and the other guys as much as I can be, and then go and do the same thing with Jason. So, yeah, hopefully that answers your question. It's not because there's any issue or animosity with those guys. I think they're all fantastic guys.
Yeah.
I just answered the question to myself when I had to think about it. I always went to New York to Henzo's to train with John. And I wasn't going if Craig wasn't going to be there, or if Nicky Rod wasn't going to be there, or if Nicky Ryan wasn't going to be there, I wasn't going to be like, oh, well, I'm not going to go to New York. Whereas if John wasn't going to be there, I wouldn't have gone in that time period, for instance. So, yeah, that was a pretty easy answer for me. And I think whatever their problems are with each other is up to them. But I think as a kind of outsider, it's not right to just play both sides of the field. I think you should kind of choose one or the other. That's what I think. But, everyone's different. But that's why I'm looking at it. So hopefully I catch up with those guys. But the reality is I'm going to be going from training sessions to a hotel room to training sessions to a hotel room. That's just how it goes.
This is a man on a mission. No socializing. No comedy clubs with Bobby.
I told you that I'm part autistic, Sonny. Yeah. Bobby Sandu's the opposite to me. Bobby thrives on the for those that don't know Bobby Sandu, he's Bobby's was a student of mine. I don't know whose student he is. He has that many different daddies nowadays, but he's just come back from B Team and gone back over there again. But Bobby loves the social aspect, and he's a sociable guy. He's a funny guy. He's a charismatic guy.
Legend.
But for me personally, the way I can get the most out of that particular experience, it's by hyper-focusing just on the training aspect rather than letting anything else kind of pull me away from that. So I know that doesn't sound very exciting, but hopefully there's a reason why my guys are going to be better than everyone else,
Well, that's it. I think it illustrates your drive and the focus that you're placing on it quite well, that you are just solely going there for a fact-finding mission or just research and training. And that's the number one priority. And you're sticking to your gut instinct and just what has proven successful for you. And there's no need to alter it for your own training and for your coaching skills. And I guess maybe last question might be then, when you go over there, you're, rocking up to the gym, ready to take a class. What are your ways to retain and just, how do you, the most information, the most techniques? Are you getting as many private lessons as possible, just attending the regular classes? What's your way of just making it the most effective and efficient research and technique gathering trip?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. And I think everybody learns differently. So what I find works for me may not work for you. I see plenty of grapplers who look like they're looking out the window the whole time, but he's actually still taking things on board. So some people have a phenomenal ability to just take on what's around them. Some people have to write it down. Everyone's different, right? But I'm just talking from what works for me. I'm at a point now where when I get in there and John starts teaching, a lot of probably 80% of what he says, I'm going to already be relatively across. And that sounds cocky, but if I'm not, I've been wasting my time for the last 5 years. So I should be across most of what he says. So if he starts talking about specific terminology or positions, I should already be relatively across kind of goals here. But there's always going to be, and now the mistake some people make is as soon as they start to hear something that they think they are across, they can kind of switch off a little and be like, well, I kind of know this. I see it all the time with my students. One, he kicks off, and I have to remind them, guys, just because I've gone over this before, I'm not teaching it to you again because I forgot that I taught it to you. It's a paper mache effect. I've got to keep going over things, and each time there might be a little layer that overlaps there that you missed last time, and it becomes something over time. And that's how I look at it the same. So even like John starts talking about half guard passing, I might have even seen him explain that half guard, whether it was to me in real life, whether it was an instructional, whatever. I've seen Gordon do it in live, one of his students do it, or I've had Jason explain it to me. So there's this whole cross-hatching of information, but I'm always kind of paying attention as best I can for just those little bits of information that kind of flick a light bulb on and you go, oh, yeah, Jesus, I've been doing this the whole time, but that detail there makes perfect sense. That helps me understand it, and I think I could now help someone else understand it better, whatever it is. It might have just been a positioning thing. It might have been an explanation thing. It might have even just been like, look, the goal here is this. And you go, oh, shit, I didn't realize that was my main goal there. Again, that's why I go to John, because most other guys I find are just teaching techniques. And John, obviously you have to have techniques, but John also puts it in the right context for you to then implement those techniques. So I'm sitting there paying attention to all the small details. And then at the end of class, I always make a point of just grabbing someone and just filming what we did that day. And then what I do is I have folders in my phone for every position you can possibly think about in jiu-jitsu. Those folders initially were quite broad. They might have been leg locks 5 years ago, and now they're 50-50 inside senkaku, diagonal lashi lace. They become more and more refined as I understand it more, and I realize they need their own, like if I've got them lumped into here, it's like if Google, you wanted to look up black cats, but Google only had cats all in one and white cats and red cats all come up in the one thing. Like you start to realize that the more precise I can be, the better I can recall that information. So I put it into folders, and then once it's in there, I know I can always go back to it. And I can pretty well then, I've just got an ability, I'm not totally savant-like at all, not at all, but I can always kind of remember that day when John taught that. I can kind of remember, yep, I remember when he taught that, and here are the points. So I can kind of commit that to memory there. And as those things are more and more familiar to me, it's easier for me to just commit it to memory and just adjust any small details. So a lot of it this time I feel like will be more refinement. There's definitely going to be a moment where Gordon shows a pass and you're like, oh, I hadn't even used that gripping before. That's really cool there. I see what he's doing. But most of it is just small adjustments here and there. As far as private lessons, I think a lot of people use private lessons incorrectly. They just assume if they do a private lesson, they're going to get better. And like people ask me to do private lessons, and sometimes we do a lesson and I'm like, I don't even know that you even had anything planned there. You just wanted to hang out for an hour, and that's fine. Like as a person, who's making money off that, that's fine. But I would like you to leave. I want you to leave a private, even if you're not my student, I want you to leave a private lesson where you, for instance, were asking me about how to mount someone. You leave like with a substantially better understanding of the mount, for instance. I think people do private lessons and don't have a direction they want to go. They don't even have questions. They just go, teach me something. I think that's a total waste of your time. So what I try to do if I choose to do a private, which I probably won't this time, if I do, I have a very specific set of questions, and he can teach me so much more efficiently and quickly doing that. So if I go inside Senkaku and they hit a turnout and I pass the leg and then I lose the knee line, what am I doing here to fix that? He can go, oh, yeah, adjust this. Like, that's what I'm trying to do with my students when they question. If you can teach people how to ask questions better, they kind of pay more attention to the actual grappling as well, because they feel like, shit, I can't just go, oh, it gets out of my leg locks. I have to actually be more specific, and that makes you understand it better. That's what I try and do with privates. So if I was to do one, I would have a whole list. So like by the end of that, and I've also got my value in money and time. If I do a private with John this time, it's going to be less about jiu-jitsu as far as the techniques are concerned, and more about how he likes to structure a lesson, how he likes to structure, at what volume to teach what thing, more about coaching than it is about the better of my actual jiu-jitsu, if that makes sense. But again, these are guys who are very time poor. They're guys who are also very expensive. I think a private with Gordon nowadays is about $1,000 US, I think.
Wow.
Like, I don't think there's value for me. I'm not saying sitting with Gordon for an hour is not value. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like,
Sure.
Can I commit, say, $1,500 Australian dollars for just that hour? Or is there another way that $1,500 could be spent better to better my students? So that's something I've got to consider. So as far as Jason, I still do privates with Jason all the time. So when I get over there, I don't necessarily need to carve out, oh, can we sit down for an hour and do this? Because he's very giving with his time when I'm there. I can ask him anything and we can sit down, like we're at the gym till it closes, he drops me home, whatever. So I nearly feel like I've taken advantage of him sometimes there, but I don't do a lesson as far as can we book in this time. But Jason and I basically do one private from the time I'm there till the time I leave. But I'm lucky enough where I texted him a video of Ethan and I training. I said, what do you think I should have done here? And he just made some adjustments. And that wasn't so I could be a better grappler. It was so that I could, if one of the students are in that position, I can assist them in understanding it. How a lot of guys are they're getting better because they want to be a better athlete. I think if I'm a better athlete, I'm not doing it so that I can have some type of glory. It's so that I think if I'm a better athlete, I can be a better coach for them, if that makes sense to you. So as far as the private lesson and how I'm approaching the lessons and how I remember stuff, that's basically my formula. And then I rehash it. So I just go back over these things. But yeah, I'm kind of excited I think this time I have a better ability to receive the information. I think if you're doing the right things, each time you train, you should be in a better position to receive the information. And once you hit, there's kind of like this sweet spot, and it's not measurable, but I find you hit this sweet spot where you're making sense with your coach and what he's putting out. And now you can just jump levels so much quicker. Whereas in the beginning, it's I'm trying to get it going and I don't understand the terminology, and he's changing this. And then after a while, it just compounds. And I'm seeing that with the training room. And it's I keep saying it's exciting, but it is. For me, this being my full-time thing, and it's like creating a piece of artwork. It's what these guys can potentially go out and do. These guys are young, fit, athletes. It's I get to paint with this. I'm not worried about myself as an athlete. I get to do so much more through them. It's really, really exciting for me. Now I hold a lot of responsibility to myself for that, because if they all go out and fucking lose, that's on me. If they lose because they weren't prepared properly, that's on me. So I hold myself to a standard way above what anyone else could hold me to. But I think that's my responsibility as a coach. And to come full circle to what I was talking about when we started, I get a bit cranky with people who are in our industry who are calling themselves coaches who are not really doing what I think coaches should be doing. And they're selling people jiu-jitsu memberships and selling them gyms. And I'm like, that's not fair. Just because your students don't understand what's good and what's not, you're kind of taking advantage of that just so you can fill your pockets. But anyway, that's a talk for another day, maybe.
I'm sure that's a talk that you've had before. And I think we did touch on that one too, on the first one.
Maybe we did.
But it's, I mean, you talk about you being excited, and I feel that, I'm excited hearing about it. You're pumped up, and it's good to see. And it's certainly coming across just that passion for, excellence in coaching and jiu-jitsu,
Yep.
which is, the ideal goal, really.
If you're gonna do anything, Sonny, it doesn't have to be jiu-jitsu. Whatever it is that your outlet is. I mean, most people hate their fucking job, but let's say you love your job. You're a lawyer. Like, you should be totally obsessed about being the best at it. Maybe you love your job at Woolies and you want to pack the shelves better than anyone else. I don't care. You should be something in your life you're trying to be fantastic at. I think that's like something that can give your life a lot of value. And I mean, I'm lucky enough that it also happens to be, I hate to use the word lucky, but I'm lucky enough that it happens to be the way that I'm also making a living for my family. I can apply like something that I'm absolutely obsessed about and love and make it financial for myself. But if anyone listening, like, have something that you're really fucking good at. It doesn't have to be jiu-jitsu.
What a great spot to wrap that up, Luke. That's that'll be the promo clip, I think.
Well, thanks for the chat, Sonny Brown. It's always great to see you, mate.
Yeah, great to speak to you too. And yeah, if people want to get in touch, it's Sydney West Martial Arts and Leglock Luke
Oz.
On
if
Instagram.
We can solve that. There must be someone out there that knows how to solve that problem. I don't know what it is, but this guy, have a look at his Instagram. It's like a couple of horses. It makes no sense.
Maybe we'll get someone on the case.
Yeah.
All right, mate. I'll speak to you soon and take care.
All right, Sonny. You're a good man.
Cheers, mate. Bye.
See you, mate.
You have been listening to the Sonny Brown Breakdown. Until next time, you can visit sonnybrown.net to find out more ways to break it down.